What is going on, everybody? In today's video, we are hopping right into a 12-team full PPR mock draft for the 2024 fantasy football season. If you guys are new to the channel, this is all we do here all year long. Free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to hit that subscribe button on the way in and join the community. If you guys have any questions for your upcoming fantasy football drafts, let me know down below. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. But in today's video, we will be going round by round, talking about what players I currently like, what strategy I'm going to be implementing from the 1.3, and giving you guys an in-depth breakdown of what a real mock draft with real actual subscribers, members of this community would look like. So let's not waste any time. Let's hop right into today's video. Okay, so drafted from the 1.3, a majority of the time you're going to see a wide receiver off the board. In this draft, we see CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill gone, so you have to take Christian McCaffrey, which for me, you're going to end up going hero running back. But what I'll do for you guys in this video is I will talk about what you can do if you do end up getting a Tyreek Hill or CeeDee Lamb, which are the most likely selections from the 1.3. And actually, that kind of makes me reverse what I just said. We're not going to go hero running back. We're going to try out a different strategy, what I call a bounce back strategy, where if you went running back in the first round, then you're going to go wide receiver in the second, running back in the third, wide receiver in the fourth, running back in the fifth, wide receiver in the sixth, and just bounce between positions, fill out your roster that way, then let a good value tight end or quarterback fall to you. So really, whether we went running back or wide receiver in the first round, we're still able to implement this strategy here from the 1.3. You can just imagine us getting Tyreek Hill or CeeDee Lamb at the 1.3, but this is why I like to do these mock drafts with our subscriber base, with our community, because you never know what's going to happen, and it kind of gives you a more potential realistic look at what you might be looking at when it's time to actually draft in your home leagues. So CeeDee Lamb off the board there at the 1.1, Tyreek Hill at the 1.2, and then we go with Christian McCaffrey at the 1.3. I wouldn't bank on seeing this, but every now and then it may happen. But I think majority of your drafts, you're going to see C-Mac on at the 1.1. Every now and then I might see C-Mac go with the 1.2 with Hill or Lamb at the 1.1. But at the end of the day, hey, I'll take it. I'll take Christian McCaffrey all day long at the 1.3. I don't think you're passing on him if he's available there in your upcoming drafts or even your mock drafts. So outside of that, pretty typical through the first round overall. These are the players you're going to see gone. You see Bijan fall back a little bit here. But other than that, those first 12 players off the board are who's probably going to be gone in your upcoming drafts. And then going in the second round, some combination of Marvin Harrison Jr., Kyron, Saquon Barkley, JT will kick off the second round. We see Adams at the 2.2. That's fine. Sometimes he goes a little bit later. Now we see Drake London. For the most part, these are the first 18 players that will be off the board, the exact players that you see on the screen, except for maybe Devontae Adams. Every now and then he falls back a little bit further. Maybe you see Chris Olave in the mix, or Derrick Henry, who's just off of the board. Now, regardless, let's move along to the 2.10. And what we're going to do is we are simply going to take the best available wide receiver. There goes Brandon Ayuk. So we're looking at Chris Olave, Mike Evans, or Nico Collins as our selection. I like all three of these guys here for different reasons. I'd be happy with any of them as my wide receiver one, but the player who I think will have the best overall target share throughout the season is going to be Chris Olave. I think Nico Collins is very close there for me. I'm a big fan of Nico Collins going into the season. I'm okay with taking Nico Collins there. But overall, I think Chris Olave will fit in nicely as a player who's going to bring a consistent floor and good enough ceiling on a week in, week out basis in full PPR for us, and can definitely finish as a wide receiver one on the season. So moving ahead to the 3.3, we're simply going to take the best available running backs. When we look at things right now, you got Josh Jacobs, Isaiah Pacheco, and Rachaad White all available. So literally just going to take who you like the best out of those available players. Now, I will say whenever I do this strategy, if you're just sitting, if you're at the 3.3 and there's just a player who you feel like it just brings ridiculous value to the board at the opposite position, which in this case would be wide receiver, that's okay to go wide receiver here and then just go running back in the 410 and kind of backtrack. But for me, I think there's good enough running backs here. For me, I don't have a problem taking Isaiah Pacheco there. I think he has top 5 RB potential on the coming season. So I'm perfectly fine. I think taking him at the 3.3, nothing wrong with that. I'll take him there all day long. Love him behind Christian McCaffrey. We have a ton of upside already at the running back position. And now we're just going to look to draft the best available wide receiver in the 4th round. And we'll continue to go back and forth at these 2 positions throughout this whole draft. Let a good quarterback come to us and let a good tight end come to us. Now, generally, if I draft a running back in the 1st, especially a running back of Christian McCaffrey's caliber, then I'm going to hero running back. And if you guys want to check out, I'll link it down below. I have a mock draft done for this same exact format from the 1.1, where I go Christian McCaffrey and where I go hero running back. And then I also have a mock draft done from the 1.2, which I will also link down below if you guys want to see that. And I'm working on getting a mock draft done from every single draft position for a 12-team league for you guys to have at your disposal. Plus, we are running tons of mock drafts and underdog drafts, both in 12-team formats, throughout the entire week that you guys can check out. Those are all on the channel as well. All right, so here in the 2nd round, pretty aggressive at wide receiver so far, which, not good news for us considering we're going wide receiver at the 410, but I still think there's actually a nice little pool of players that should be available in that range. You got guys like T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, and Christian Kirk, as well as Terry McLaurin and Rashee Rice, who I think could all be available there. Honestly, I'd be okay with any of those players. But the players that I like the most, while I do really like Rashee Rice, he sometimes falls a little bit further in drafts. I really like Amari Cooper or Christian Kirk. I think both of those guys can potentially finish as wide receiver ones on the season and are true wide receiver ones on both of their respective teams. Just, both on offenses that aren't really being looked at as like high value, high ceiling offenses going into the year, the Browns and the Jaguars. But I like both of those guys where they're going in drafts. I think they're absolutely worth the selection. And we're in a position with just Chris Olave on this roster where we need to continue to try and rack up players who are true wide receiver ones. So we're here at the 4.4. The top available players are Travis Kelce, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Rashad White, and CJ Stroud. So a lot of quarterbacks, a couple tight ends, and a few running backs. If we go past that, you got Trey McBride, James Cook, and Mark Andrews, as well as Joe Mixon, Dalton Kincaid, Alvin Kamara, and Kenneth Walker as the top available players. So not a lot of wide receivers at the top of the board at this given moment. Might be good news for us, but I know this community. I know what it's like to draft with our subscriber base, with real people, and you never quite know what's going to happen. Got a lot of sharp drafters in here, and that's why I like to do my mock draft videos with my community, because I know that if you're drafting against computer, you're drafting against a lobby that's half computer, half not computer, you're not getting a realistic mock draft. There's just no reason to do those mock drafts whatsoever. So you want to make sure you're mocking with real, actual people. So I didn't mention this name earlier, but George Pickens is still available. I thought he might go. There goes Amari Cooper. So part of me wants to go running back here, then go wide receiver in the 5th. I mean, it's not really any different. I think we'd still, have the potential to land Christian Kirk. So let's go ahead and do that, and let's go Joe Mixon here. I think Alvin Kamara is fine there as well. But I don't want to double dip into that Saints offense. I think it's better just to kind of diversify here and mix in a player who was going before, like Rashad White and James Cook earlier in the offseason. Now he's been dealing with 1 or 2 injuries, so he's being pushed back a little bit further in drafts. But he's still the RB1 for the Houston Texans, still going to get plenty of good red zone touches on a good offense. So I like him as our 3rd running back option. And now Christian Kirk does go at the 4.11, and Amari Cooper went at the 4.9. So like I said, never underestimate the power of drafting with the Catch Fam community because they're going to come out and draft sharply. So I thought Kirk would fall there, but he does not. Should have known better. So now we go Pickens, Higgins, Keenan Allen. I don't really prefer him. There goes Higgins is another good selection here. I'm going to reach a little bit here, and I'm going to take Rashee Rice off the board. And I think Pickens is okay there, but I don't really prefer Pickens in a redraft format. Okay. I like him more in like a best ball format. I guess he's a true wide receiver one, which goes against what I was just talking about, where we needed a true wide receiver one. Um, but I just don't feel great about the Steelers overall as an offense right now. He's okay there. If that's who you prefer, it's okay. It's just not who I prefer. So Rashee Rice for me is a guy who, I think when we look going into this coming season, I've talked about Rashee Rice all throughout the offseason. This is the wide receiver one for the Kansas City Chiefs. If he gets suspended, I don't think it's going to be more than 3 or 4 games. And there's a strong chance he's not even suspended until the following year in 2025. So I'm not panicked on Rashee Rice. Maybe his upside's not massive, especially with Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown being added to this offense, but he just brings a really nice, consistent floor and ceiling and in full PPR, excuse me. So I'll continue to draft Rashee Rice like he's a wide receiver one and have no problem with it. So kind of mentioned there, like we went running back, wide receiver, and then 2 running backs and a wide receiver. But kind of strategically, I thought maybe we can go Mixon and then Kirk would fall. We still come out of rounds 4 and 5 with a running back and wide receiver, so it doesn't look like that bounce back strategy on the screen, but it's basically the same exact thing. So either way, we would have got like Kirk and Mixon, Mixon and Rice, or Kirk and Kamara. Not too much of a difference there unless you're really worried about the Rashee Rice suspension being an issue. So I prefer Amari Cooper there. I will say if he was there at the 410, I'm smashing the draft button on Cooper because I don't think he has the potential to fall. But regardless, Cooper, Kirk, Higgins, Rice, even Pickens or McLaurin, we had good options at wide receiver there. So moving along to the 6-10, technically we need to go running back, but we could go wide receiver if we feel like there's better value. And the player that I'm telling you guys on the sleeper app to keep a sharp eye on in terms of ADP, if you are needy at the wide receiver position, is Christian Watson. His ADP on sleeper is 101.8. I think he's an absolute steal. Like, I don't think, and drafting with this community, he'll fall past our selection at 7.3. But he just offers just a tremendous amount of upside where he's going currently in drafts. So I will say, I think drafting here with C-Mac, Pacheco, and Mixon, we might double dip into wide receiver at the 6-10 and the 7-3 and deviate from our strategy just a little bit because I think we can actually get a decent value at running back in the 8th. And this is one of those drafts where we don't really need more than 4 running backs. When we look at available quarterbacks, we still got Stroud, Richardson, Burrow, Prescott, Murray, and Kyler. Like, we got plenty of good quarterbacks. I'm not panicking. Evan Ingram still sitting here. I think there's a little bit of a tier break after Ingram gets drafted, but I would add Ferguson right outside that tier, maybe in that same tier right next to Ingram. And Ferguson on sleeper has an ADP of 87.8. So I think we can also hold off at tight end. But if you wanted to consider Ingram with one of these next 2 picks, I don't necessarily think it's crazy. But the wide receiver that I like the best here is probably Deontay Johnson. And then we'll see if we can come back at 7. There goes Deontay Johnson. After I saw who was drafting before me, I knew that there was a good chance he might get selected there. So I think Jordan Addison's okay here. I do, but you know what? We will knock tight end out here. Let's go Evan Ingram, and let's move right along. And I just think Evan Ingram is one of those players when he's available and you don't really like what you see on the board, just go ahead and take him. He was a tight end 2 last year. He was a tight end 5 in 2022. I don't know how, like, when we have ever seen a player at any position finish as a top 5 player at their respective position 2 years in a row and just get pushed all the way down rankings. Like, look at how many tight ends get drafted in front of Evan Ingram. There's a lot of nice new shiny toys in Laporta, McBride, Kincaid. Love all those guys, and there's still kind of those elite guys: Andrews, Kittle, Kelsey, kind of the veteran range of players there. Then you got Kyle Pitts finally with a competent quarterback. So like I understand why all those players are going, but man, Evan Ingram just widely disrespected when it comes to fantasy football, it seems like on a yearly basis. So I will go ahead and just take Christian Watson a little bit against ADP here. I don't think he comes back to us. And I feel like we need that potential for a wide receiver one in Christian Watson, which I love Christian Watson. I don't mind drafting him against his ADP. And I do think when healthy, he is the wide receiver one for the Packers. I think you got a great outside wide receiver who's also being undervalued in Romeo Dobbs, who had the same amount of touchdowns as Jaden Reed last year. Jaden Reed is the true slot wide receiver for the Packers. I still like Reed. I still think he's okay to draft where he's going in terms of ADP, but also don't forget that a lot of the touchdowns to Jaden Reed and arguably to Romeo Dobbs came closer to the red zone. And this year, this Green Bay Packers offense is going to have Josh Jacobs and maybe a little bit of Marshawn Lloyd and I think AJ Dillon's still on this team, but mainly Josh Jacobs, who's going to take away some of those, potential red zone touches. So for me, I think when healthy, Watson is the alpha wide receiver, the wide receiver who plays the most like a true wide receiver one on this offense and just the upside that he brings to the table. I mean, I've talked a lot about Watson throughout the offseason, but Watson I just think is a steal at his ADP, and I'm not afraid to take him against ADP. Now, we drafted Rashid Rice in the fifth. Pickens was there, McLaurin was there, Reed was there. We could have gone with one of those three wide receivers and still gotten a piece of the Chiefs' offense in the sixth round or even the seventh round in Xavier Worthy. I don't mind that either. I didn't know if Worthy would necessarily fall out there, but let's say we went Pickens, McLaurin, or Reed in the fifth, then got Worthy, then got Watson. I'm okay with that. Or if we wanted to go running back with maybe that seventh round pick, get a guy like Zamir White who's locked in as an RB1 for the Raiders. Maybe Raheem Mostert, who I think has tremendous value where he's being drafted and still going to be very relevant in a high scoring offense. I think those would have been okay selections too. So just always remember to try and kind of play the board, look ahead a little bit. But for me, I just didn't quite know. Xavier Worthy's ADP is just all over the place. And I'm very keen on trying to get one of the three Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers. But we kind of were in a position where maybe we weren't going for one of the two guys in Hollywood Brown or Xavier Worthy that's going to bring more upside, but maybe less consistency. And we need to get the guy who's going to potentially bring the most consistency, and that's Rashid Rice. So do not forget that I am still running several streams throughout the week where I am hopping into real 2024 fantasy football drafts on Underdog Fantasy. If you guys don't want to wait any longer to draft 2024 fantasy football teams, you don't have to. Underdog has all kinds of different unique contests that you guys can enter, including their flagship Best Ball Mania, where somebody is going to win up to $1.5 million. This is the best way to prepare for the upcoming fantasy football season. These are the sharpest drafts throughout the offseason. Plus, Underdog already has week one NFL pick'ems out where you guys can play in their new streaks format and win up to 1000x your money. Promo code the catch, the link is down below as well. Get you a first time 50% deposit match up to $250 plus a mystery pick'em that you guys can use towards that streaks up to 1000x your money. Promo code the catch. Don't forget, when you sign up, we'll get you that first time 50% deposit match on Underdog Fantasy. We will see how things shake out here. Looking ahead to 8.10 and 9.3. I'm not going to panic about RB4 just yet. Once again, we got like three studs. We got C-Mac, Pacheco, and I know Mixon's been a little bit banged up to start the offseason, but I think he'll be fine. So I think our main focus here has got to be wide receiver. I think we can continue to kind of just make this a zero quarterback team. I mean, Prescott and Jordan Love are still available. I think those are the last guys kind of in that top tier. Purdy goes before both of them. Maybe because that team has Kittle, or maybe because they like Purdy more than Prescott and Love, which I think there's an argument for. But yeah, I think we go back to back wide receiver in the eighth and ninth round here. And then we get a lower tier like RB4 in the 10th or the 11th round. And we'll just kind of finish out at quarterback and kind of bench players. I mean, we're in a good spot here where we have a roster kind of filled out. We need wide receiver depth. This is the highest need on this team. And let's go ahead and take Lad McConkey because I do think he will get the most targets for any Chargers wide receiver this coming year. I think Palmer, some people are high on him, and I like Josh Palmer. But a lot of people aren't really thinking about Palmer, and I do think he's going to be a factor and get plenty of red zone looks potentially. But I think Lad McConkey has the highest chance just to get the most overall targets in terms of wide receivers on this Chargers team going into next season. So I love him there. He can potentially play in full PPR like a true wide receiver one. I don't know how high the ceiling is, and you got to pay attention to that Justin Herbert injury, but it looks like he's going to be good to go to start week one. Still a wide receiver one potentially for the Chargers, so we'll take him there in the eighth. Then the player that I'll target going into the 9.3 selection is Cortland Sutton, because Cortland Sutton, although on a bad offense, is still a wide receiver one for his respective offense, and that is what we need right now. And, Russell Wilson, I think, got more hate last year than he deserved. Actually played, if you look at the stats, a little bit better than you might think. And this team was still in position to make the playoffs last year. And at the end of the day, Cortland Sutton and Russell Wilson had a good connection, but it's not like the quarterback play last year was outstanding by any means. And Cortland Sutton still found a way at the end of the day to be a wide receiver two for your fantasy football team and have some insane red zone touches or red zone catches and 10 total touchdowns on the season. I mean, you really break that down, right? He just had he played in 16 games last year, so that's just 6 games last year where he did not score a touchdown. So I mean, literally didn't have more than one touchdown in any game. So it's 6 games where he did not score a touchdown last year. Super efficient in the red zone. I think that can be very beneficial to a rookie quarterback like Bo Nix or whoever the Broncos quarterback ends up being this year. So in the 9th round, for what we need on this team, I'll take him. So we've definitely deviated from that original bounce back strategy, but this is just kind of the position we got put in. Felt like Ingram was too good to pass up on in the 6th. And then we have 3 very good running backs through the first 4 rounds. Need to kind of load up at wide receiver here. And we'll just kind of see what happens as we continue to finish things out. We'll probably get one more running back at least on this team, and I can talk about who I want to target in just a second here. Might be 1 or 2 names. We'll definitely need a late round quarterback. Maybe we end up going 2 quarterbacks depending on who's there in terms of upside. And then we'll just finish out this roster with wide receiver depth, unless there's just like a running back that I think has screaming value as we start to wrap up here. But right now, if we look at available running backs, Gus Edwards is the top rated running back. That's who I would prefer, but I don't think he's going to make it back to the 10.10. So I'm going to start to look at names like Jerome Ford, Zach Charbonnet, and Chuba Hubbard. Now, I think there's a high chance that at least 2 of those running backs are gone by the time we draft. We're seeing a little bit of a run at running back here in the 9th, so I won't be surprised. But on a team that has C-Mac, Pacheco, and Mixon, I'm okay with any of those guys as my RB4. There goes another running back in Gus Edwards. But if you guys have been following the channel throughout the offseason, you've heard me talk about Jerome Ford in the later rounds. Love him. I don't think Nick Chubb's going to be ready when we want him to be ready. I think Jerome Ford's going to have all the value touches to start the year, especially with the unfortunate injury to Donta Foreman. I'm not quite sure that Pierre Strong is going to be able to really pick up that goal line work. Jerome Ford's going to be the guy to start the year. Once Nick Chubb is ready, they're not going to rush him back. I mean, there's an argument now with Foreman down. Maybe they'd be in more of a hurry, but I just think overall, with the caliber of player that Nick Chubb is, they just are not going to be in a position to rush Nick Chubb back. It's just not worth it, right? So I love Jerome Ford. I think he's a great value running back where he goes. I'd love to get him at the 10.10. But then if you look ahead to Zach Charbonnet, I think he's a great handcuff. I'm not out on Kenneth Walker, but I think Zach Charbonnet in the sophomore season could be much more utilized than he was last year. Then Chuba Hubbard, another guy, as Jerome Ford is gone at the 10.5. I just really like, because Jonathan Brooks is not going to be ready to start the year. We've already seen head coach Dave Canales come out and say that. And at the end of the day, even when Jonathan Brooks is ready, although he has the caliber to definitely play as an RB1 for this team and take over that backfield almost completely, he is still not going to get 16, 18, 20, 22 touches right off the bat. Chuba Hubbard will remain the RB1, and Jonathan Brooks will slowly get worked back in. And you can say what you want about Chuba Hubbard, but this guy was a league winner in fantasy football last year. When you were able to pick him up at the end of the season last year, he absolutely came through for you. Uh, Double digit fantasy points every game from weeks 12 through week 17 with a ceiling of 22 points. And I just checked uh, the player drafting next to me's roster and saw that he had two running backs going into this round. And I was like, oh, I've drafted with him a ton this offseason. I know he's going to pick Chuba Hubbard. So we'll take Zach Charbonnet. That's okay. I don't think we're necessarily in a bad spot at running back. We still have those three studs in front of us. But if you guys are not drafting Chuba Hubbard, you should probably start to get him on your draft radar. All right, but the good news is there's no one who I think is like a screaming value at wide receiver here. I mean, I like Shaheed, I like Josh Downs, but I think we can take Rico Dowdle with this next pick and have another running back who potentially gives us the opportunity to play like an RB1 if we wanted them. So kind of make a note there. And like I said, there are wide receivers that I like here. Shaheed and Josh Downs would kind of lead the pack, but I also like Brandon Cooks. You got Dontavion Wicks, Jahan Dotson. There's plenty of names. But at the end of the day, we're going to walk out of this draft with a stud quarterback, even with not drafting a quarterback until the 11th round. So you can take your pick here, Dak Prescott or Jordan Love. Whoever you like here more, go ahead and select. I'm going to take Jordan Love. I like Dak Prescott a lot, but we have Christian Watson on this team, so that gives us a theoretical quote unquote stack, which is not that important in single quarterback redraft leagues, but it's still kind of nice. You know, on weeks that Watson is starting and healthy and out there and playing like that alpha wide receiver one that I think he is and can be, he's going to have a good week, and so is Jordan Love because Jordan Love's going to be throwing those touchdowns to him. So take Jordan Love here and kind of give you guys a look at the roster. And we're in a pretty good spot here. I mean, we got Jordan Love, C-Mac, Pacheco, Olave, Rasheed Rice, Evan Ingram, Joe Mixon, Christian Watson, but we can also flex in Ladd McConkey or Cortland Sutton. So, I mean, kind of a lower ceiling with McConkey and Sutton, but I think that Christian Watson potentially makes up for that. Then Pacheco and C-Mac as our RB1 and RB2 can also make up for that. Plus, we got a great tight end, great quarterback value. So with these last two spots, we really just want to go best available wide receiver, or if there's a running back there that I think is too hard to pass on, which with Rico Dowdle off the board, I don't think that's going to happen. So I think we just kind of finish out at wide receiver here, especially since we're technically practicing for a double flex format. If you're playing in a single flex format, then you're kind of, I think you're gold in this position right here. So we'll just finish out with two wide receivers, and I'll kind of talk about what wide receivers I like the best in this range. Now that we are in the 12th round, I think there's plenty of options of players here that I think are good. I still like Josh Downs. If Josh Downs falls, I'll take him all day long. If you guys are in on AD Mitchell, I think that's fine. But the player who's getting the most buzz out of training camp for the Colts at the wide receiver position behind Michael Pittman is Josh Downs. And you look back to his rookie season, still had over 700 receiving yards, 68 receptions off of 98 targets. And he had that little stretch from like weeks 3 through week 8 where he looked really good, double digits in all those games except for one in week 4, and kind of fell back off. But there's a lot of inconsistency in that offense last year. So I like Josh Downs where he's going in drafts. I think he's a tremendous value at the end of the day. But he does go at the 12.5. I do like Jahan Dotson. I think he's going to be in a position to have a much improved third season after that disappointing sophomore year. So I think Dotson's in a great position. I think Jaden Daniels, Cliff Kingsbury offense going to do very good things for Dotson. Just nice potential upside, right? Dontavion Wicks is still on the board, and I don't really particularly want to draft Watson, Wicks, and Jordan Love, but I do think that you know, if Christian Watson does miss time, that means good things for Dontavion Wicks. So this is almost a position where, for lack of a better term, you're kind of handcuffing Christian Watson. So I think it actually makes sense to draft Dontavion Wicks on this team. I think Troy Franklin's okay in terms of getting a rookie wide receiver here. I think Ricky Pearsall I might like a little bit more. I still think Adam Thielen has some value, although I definitely prefer Deontay Johnson, and we'll go ahead and pick Dontavion Wicks here. Um, I like Malachi Corley a little bit later. I like Rashad Bateman, but the wide receiver that I'm taking time and time again at the end of these drafts is Demarcus Robinson of the Rams. Now, if Jaden Daniels fell here to 13.3, which he just got selected, I might consider him as well, but obviously he is gone. And I do think you could go with a second tight end here. You got Dalton Schultz, Luke Musgrave, Ben Sennett. There are options in terms of late round breakout guys that I like. But I think the best thing for this team is just to take another wide receiver. So, and you do have other good quarterbacks, Herbert, T. Law, Cousin Stafford. But I think we just want to continue to load up at wide receiver and get that depth. So Demarcus Robinson in a great position if we do get any type of serious injury, which I hope doesn't happen to Puka Nakua or Cooper Kupp. Still a part of this Rams offense at the end of the day. That's going to be a pass heavy offense. I think if everyone stays healthy, Kyron, Stafford, Puka, Kupp, this Rams offense can be one of the best in the league. You also got Blake Corum in there now. And Demarcus Robinson, just don't forget, another guy who was a league winner last year, weeks 13 through 17, once this Rams offense really started to get going. Double digits every game, a ceiling of 20 fantasy points, 4 touchdowns in 5 games. So I'm a huge fan of Demarcus Robinson and his second actual full year with this Rams offense. I think he's in line for great things. But all right, we kind of deviated from our strategy, like I mentioned, but I think we still ended up with a good roster at the end of the day here. J-Lo at quarterback, Ingram at tight end. I think we got great value at quarterback and tight end. C-Mac, Pacheco, Mixon, Zach Charbonnet. So just don't be too afraid. Like if you get a running back of Christian McCaffrey's caliber, or Brees Hall, or Bijan Robinson, whether you go hero running back or double hero running back, which this is kind of a weird spot where we end up with 3 running backs for the first 4 rounds. But if you're kind of light at running back, like you're mainly relying on C-Mac, Pacheco, and Mixon, don't be too afraid because between those 3 guys in the waivers, you will be okay, right? We get Charbonnet as a nice little handcuff who I think still has some potential in terms of standalone value as well. Then at wide receiver, Olave, Rashee Rice. I mean, I think we really end up with a good value on Rashee Rice there. Watson, Ladd McConkey, Cortland Sutton, Dontavion Wicks, Demarcus Robinson. So we end up with good wide receiver depth. It's just important, like maybe you don't like Wicks and Robinson, but you need to identify guys in the 12th, 13th, even 11th and 10th round at wide receiver who you think bring good value to your roster and that you can draft at the end of your draft to add added upside and depth at the position, especially if you play in a double flex full PPR format. So still a good roster here at the end of the day. Kind of deviated away from the strategy, but I still think we pieced together a good roster. Like I said, I'll link those other 2 drafts from the 1.1 and the 1.2 down below. We've got plenty of 12-team mock drafts, plenty of 12-team real drafts on Underdog that you guys can check out on the channel. If you guys have any fantasy football questions, redraft, dynasty, best ball, drop them down below, and I will keep working on getting all these mock drafts out for you guys for the remainder of the off season. If you guys did enjoy the video in today's mock draft, be sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. Come join the community. This is all we do here all year long, free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, subscribe. That's all I ask. With that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening, and remember, you saw it here on the catch.